The scene replays in my memory like yesterday. My name is Katie, and I'm 32. Honestly, looking back, I'm baffled by my own actions. I was in the kitchen, engaged in a conversation with my sister Sarah about something that should have stayed private. You know how it is, saying something too bluntly only to realize you'd have been better off keeping silent? Yep, that was me. I didn't think he'd overhear, though perhaps deep down, I didn't deem it significant enough to warrant caution. I confessed to Sarah that given the chance, I wouldn't have married John, my husband. The statement slipped out casually, almost carelessly, as if I were discussing a bad hair day, not the man I pledged forever to. I can't even pinpoint why I said it. Maybe boredom, maybe I wanted her sympathy. John hadn't done anything wrong, not then. He was in another room, likely absorbed in his phone, as was his habit when relaxing after work. But the words were out, and then silence. Not Sarah's chatter, accustomed to my theatrical flair. It was a silence that suffocated like a sudden change in atmosphere. Turning my head, I saw him in the doorway. He said nothing. No raised voice, no requests for clarification, no visible anger. He just looked at me for a moment, his face an impassive mask, and then exited. The sound of the front door clicking shut made my stomach churn. I hadn't anticipated that. Truthfully, I expected an argument or at least annoyance. But leave? It wasn't his style. John was always composed, patient, the one who balanced my, let's call it, energy. I truly didn't believe he'd actually leave. I mean, I hadn't declared hatred or announced a departure. I was simply venting, right? Isn't that the dynamic with sisters? You say things you don't mean because they understand you. That's the unspoken agreement. Sarah was speechless, her eyes wide with disbelief. Instead of acknowledging my mistake, I compounded it. I laughed and said, "He'll get over it. He's just being dramatic." Why did I say that? Perhaps admitting fault meant facing the guilt, and I wasn't ready. Hours passed, and he didn't return. I tried calling him, and when there was no answer, I sent a text. "Are you okay?" Still nothing. Fine, I thought. If he wants to pout, his call. I wasn't going to plead over something minor. But as night wore on, a peculiar blend of anger and panic took hold. How dare he leave me hanging here? But where the hell is he? Is this some kind of lesson? I didn't go to bed until midnight, scrolling through TikTok, pretending I wasn't waiting for him to come back. He didn't. Finally, I gave in to sleep, more annoyed than anything. He'd return when ready, I told myself, and I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Spoiler alert, I did. The following morning, his side of the bed was still empty. His toothbrush remained in the bathroom. His shoes were by the door. He hadn't packed and left for good. But the uneasy feeling persisted. Another text. "Where are you? Can we talk?" Silence again. Now real worry began. Not because of remorse, but because I loathe being ignored. The silent treatment is a skill I have yet to acquire. If there's an issue, I require discussion, negotiation, and forward progress. John leans towards letting things settle, which drives me crazy. I confided in Sarah, and she suggested, "Maybe you should apologize." Apologize? For what? For being honest? For voicing my feelings at the time? I saw no reason to grovel simply because he happened to eavesdrop. "He shouldn't have been listening," I said, rationalizing to her more than to myself. Even as the words left my mouth, they echoed empty. By the day's end, resentment surged. Who did he think he was, getting me so wound up? If he disliked what I said, he could have stayed and addressed it like an adult. Instead, he bolted, leaving me the villain. Fine. Maybe I am. But I didn't utter anything false. I question if I'd be happier had we not begun our relationship. That doesn't negate the love I have, right? Yet despite my attempts to convince myself otherwise, a subtle doubt has begun to creep in. Did I cross the line? John's consistently allowed me to dictate, always agreeing, even when I knew agreement wasn't genuine. Perhaps I took it for granted. I just presumed he'd be constant, unwavering. Now, for the first time, I wasn't so sure. The clock ticked, and still no John. I attempted to call his mother, but she also knew nothing. Then, genuine worry set in. Was this more than just anger? Had something happened to him? But John's never prone to recklessness or foolish behavior. He's the most predictable person I've known. That predictability at times irritates me. By nightfall, distress consumed me. I was conflicted. Anger, worry, or indifference. I craved to text him again, but wanted to avoid seeming desperate. So, I just stared at my phone, anticipating the glow of a message that would never come. The next day, John was still gone. I told myself to be calm, yet each distant car's approach sent a jolt to my heart. I constantly checked my phone, refreshing messages like an idiot, as if I had skipped his reply. Nothing, not a word. Now, the irritation had firmly won. Who does that? Disappears without informing his wife? Immature, pure and simple. Then, staring at my coffee, realization hit. What if this time he was really gone? Had I finally pushed him too far? The thought was unwelcome, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it lingered. John's not one for games, not for the silent treatment. If he'd left, there was a reason, and maybe it was more severe than I wanted to concede. Around noon, Sarah called to inquire. "Has he called you?" she asked. Her tone was softer than usual, as if trying not to frighten me. "No," I answered sharply. "And frankly, it's ridiculous. He is making this a mountain out of a molehill, not me." "Kat," she responded cautiously, "you're the one who made this a problem in the first place." I wanted to end the call. "You're supposed to be on my side," I said instead. But guilt stung. She wasn't totally right, but partially right. Maybe I had elevated it, but I never intended to cause pain. I didn't imagine he'd react this way. I didn't tell him I was leaving or that I didn't love him. Emotions are freely expressed. He's just overly sensitive. By night, I resolved to stop waiting. If he didn't come back on his own, I would search for him. Again, I called his mother, who knew nothing. I tried a few of his friends, who either were lying or truly clueless. One of them, Mark, expressed genuine surprise when I asked if John had contacted him. "Is everything all right?" he asked, and I battled the urge to lash out. "Yeah, fine," I answered quickly. "Just checking." After that, I drove around town for an hour, without direction. John wasn't inclined to bars, nor spend the night with a friend without communicating. He's steady, predictable. So where was he? When I returned, he was absent. His toothbrush, his shoes, everything screamed that he should be here. I stood in the kitchen for an eternity, fixated on the front door, wishing for it to open. But it didn't. The house was too quiet, and I hated it. I began browsing our joint bank account, half curious, half desperate to appear productive. And then I saw it. A hotel charge from that day. He wasn't at my mom's, or God forbid, with someone else. He was at a hotel alone. I didn't know whether to feel relief or anger. So, he was all right. Hiding in a hotel, avoiding me, as if I wasn't worthy of a discussion. The audacity. I instantly called the hotel. I didn't know what I would have said if he'd picked up, but it was irrelevant, because the receptionist wouldn't confirm anything. "I am sorry, ma'am," she stated in a fake, polite tone. "But I cannot disclose information regarding our guests." I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up and composed a new text. "I know where you are," I wrote with trembling fingers. "Can you cease acting like a child and return home so we can discuss this?" I stared at the message for a few minutes, then erased it. If he chose to be a coward, so be it. I wouldn't plead. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't ease. I hated that feeling of lost control, of him gaining the upper hand. John was the one meant to pursue, to forgive, to let me vent, and then move forward. Always. Why wasn't that still the case? The following morning, the house was empty. It bothered me. The silence, the uncertainty. I attempted to concentrate on work, but every email derailed me. My world had imploded. My husband was gone, and I was utterly lost. I kept insisting to myself it wasn't that deep, just a need for breathing room. However, the longer he was absent, the harder it was to sustain that comforting illusion. By noon, the strain was unbearable. I drove to the hotel, disregarding how unhinged I likely looked. If he wasn't coming to me, I'd have to go to him. At the hotel, the receptionist gave me the stock speech about respecting guest privacy, and I struggled with the impulse to cause a scene. "He's my husband," I snapped. Yet she just flashed that customer service smile and stated, "I'm very sorry, ma'am." Reeling, I returned to the car. Sat there, staring at the steering wheel, I began to feel something I'd repressed for years. Genuine fear. What if he stayed away? What if I'd finally pushed it too far? What if deep down, I understood it wasn't just the things I had said to Danny? This wasn't the first time I'd spoken impulsively, and certainly not the first I'd prioritized my emotions over his. Maybe this time, he was finished. Despite wanting to concede, I was not ready to offer an apology. Not yet. I needed to see him, verify he was all right, and figure a way out of this crisis. Since if there was one thing I excelled at, it was cleaning up messes. And this was just another mess, right? I didn't have to wait much to see John after the failed hotel visit. Late that night, the front door unlocked and he appeared. He didn't slam or toss his keys down like I might have done. Instead, he walked in calmly, almost unnervingly, and I couldn't read him. The flatness of his expression made me uneasy. I was geared up for an argument or any kind of intense response, but this was more unsettling. He placed his bag down near the sofa and simply stood there, sizing me up as if weighing his words. For a split second, I expected him to go straight upstairs without a word. But instead, he spoke. "We need to talk," he said in a steady, almost detached tone. "Yeah, no kidding," I retorted, crossing my arms. I was already on the defensive, despite realizing I should have apologized. But I wouldn't start first. I was incapable. Admitting fault felt like it would hand him all the power, and I wasn't prepared to concede. He sat down on the sofa and motioned for me to join him. I remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter as if I was completely occupied. "Are you going to explain your 2-day disappearance?" I asked, attempting to sound nonchalant, but my tone came out more sharp than I desired. John sighed, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them. "I needed space," he replied, "to think, to try and figure out how to even begin to talk to you after what I overheard." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, John, come on, seriously? You eavesdropped on one thing I shared privately with my sister, and now you're acting as though the world is ending." "It wasn't one thing, Katie," he replied, his voice raising slightly before calming again. "You stated you'd never date me again, and if given the opportunity, you wouldn't have picked me." "Well, maybe I wouldn't have," I blurted before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, and for a moment I instantly regretted them, but I dug in my heels. "You've changed, John. We both know it. You're not the man I married. I faltered, attempting to find the appropriate words, but my emotions overwhelmed me. "You've gotten lazy, okay? You've let yourself go. You don't even try anymore. Honestly, you can blame me for feeling this way." He looked at me, and for the first time I noticed authentic pain in his eyes. But instead of getting angry, he simply nodded slowly, as if he'd anticipated this reaction. "So that's the state of it," he quietly observed. "You see me as fat and unattractive, and that's why you don't want to be with me." I rolled my eyes again, trying to shake off the weight of the statements I'd made. Don't twist my words. I never said I didn't want to be with you. I said, if I could rewind time, I could make a different decision. That isn't the same thing. I don't think so, he responded, his voice steady but firm. And you know what? Maybe you're correct. I've changed. I have gotten older. I've gained weight. I've mellowed. However, that's a natural part of marriage, Katie. You settle into a life together. You build a life. Or at least, that is what I assumed we were doing. I felt myself blushing, and a mixture of embarrassment and anger flared up within me. Don't place all of this on me, I insisted, raising my voice. Don't you notice how distant you've become? You scarcely talk to me anymore unless it's about work, bills, or dinner. You provide me with no cause to be content in this marriage, John. So now it is my fault? He queried, attempting to sound composed, although his tone betrayed his incredulity. I'm the reason you are unhappy? The reason you lack respect for me enough to discuss these issues openly with your sister? I raised my hands in frustration. You are completely twisting things. I'm simply saying, perhaps if you were to put forth a little more effort, engage in some sports, take more interest in me the way you did initially, I would not feel this way. He stared at me for an extended duration, and then did something unexpected. He slowly rose to his feet and directly locked eyes with me. You know, Katie, I believe that reveals more about you than about me. What does that mean? I demanded, suddenly feeling a wave of panic. He didn't yell. He didn't retaliate as I anticipated. He remained collected, and for some reason that only intensified my feeling of inadequacy. It means, he continued in an even tone, that you are blind to what you have. You have a man who has consistently supported you through your impetuous choices, your spending habits, your fluctuations, a man who has never judged you for it. Rather than appreciating that, you seek ways to belittle me. I opened my mouth to reply, but he didn't allow me. I know I'm not perfect. I'm aware I've changed, but you have too. And not for the better. You've turned into a person who shirks accountability, and instead of engaging in honest communication, you lash out and would rather blame me instead of looking inward. His words hit me hard, but instead of conceding he may have a point, I countered with another attack. Oh, so you're now perfect? Some kind of saint holding this marriage together while I'm the problem? He shook his head and grabbed his bag again. No, I'm not perfect, however. I am striving to improve myself, Katie. I am exhausted by being here while you constantly make me feel you don't need me. If you don't recognize any value in me anymore, then perhaps we should take a break. I was stunned. What are you implying? I'm implying I need more than this, he said, gesturing between us. And if you're unwilling to work on it, maybe I shouldn't stay here. He did not yell. He did not slam the door as he left. He just walked out, leaving me in place, dumbfounded and more confused than I'd ever been. In the following weeks, reality hit me squarely. John didn't come by, not even for the mail. The emptiness felt heavier with each passing day I returned to the house. It was more than just the physical absence. It was the silence, the lack of his presence that was hurting me. I started to reach out to him more frequently, tentatively testing the waters. His responses were polite, but distant. Hope you're well. I will drop by on the weekend to gather my things. That was all. No warmth, no chance for conversation. He wasn't malicious, but it was evident he no longer desired vulnerability with me. The weekend arrived, and I was afraid to face him. As he walked through the door, he looked different. His shoulders seemed broader, his posture straighter. He'd trimmed his beard, and it even looked stylish, clean, focused. He even smelled different, like he'd started using cologne. I didn't want to admit it, but he looked better than he had in years. Hey, I said awkwardly, standing at the kitchen table as he walked in. Hey, he replied, nodding slightly, nothing more. He didn't ask how I was or attempt to start a conversation. Instead, he went straight to the bedroom and started putting his belongings in boxes. I followed him, uncertain what to say, but desperately trying to break the silence. "Derek, could we talk?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. He didn't stop packing. "About what?" I hesitated. "About us." He stopped and looked at me, an unreadable expression on his face. "About us, Katie? You already made your sentiments abundantly clear." "That's not how I meant it," I replied swiftly, moving closer. "I was agitated. I was not thinking clearly." He shook his head and returned to packing. "No, Katie, you knew what you were doing. You just didn't anticipate I would overhear you." A lump formed in my throat. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," he stated firmly, finally looking at me. "And it's more than this conversation. It is everything. The way you talk to me, the way you treat me, like I'm never good enough for you." I felt tears welling up, but I forced myself to maintain my composure. "I was wrong. I understand I was wrong. However, we can fix this. We've endured worse, haven't we?" He smiled wryly. "Really?" "Because in my opinion, we haven't ever been through anything quite like this, Katie. I do not believe I have ever felt so disrespected or unwanted. And the worst of all, I stayed. I persevered, even when it was clear you did not appreciate me. It's my fault. I allowed it to go this far." His words were like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, however, I couldn't. Deep down, I knew he was right. So what? Is that it? Are you abandoning me? My voice trembled, and I hated the desperation it conveyed. "I am not giving up," he stated calmly. "I am simply choosing myself. I am weary of proving my worth to somebody who doesn't see it." My mind raced as I looked at him. This wasn't how it was supposed to play out. He was supposed to forgive me and suggest that we figure things out, together. But instead, he stood there, composed and resolute, like he had already reached a conclusion. "I can change," I uttered, the words a mere whisper. "I'll make an effort. I'll be better." He exhaled and placed the box he was holding down. "Lindsay, I truly hope you do, but not for me. Do it for yourself. But I can't hold my breath for you to get there. I spent years striving to make you happy, and all I got back was criticism and ill will. I deserve more." His words cut deeper than I had expected. Tears welled up, and this time I didn't try to hide them. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice wavering. "Please, John, we can fix this." He regarded me for a lengthy moment, and for a fleeting instant, I believed I saw something flash in his eyes. Perhaps regret, or maybe remorse. However, he then shook his head. "I've already sacrificed too much trying to repair things," he said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." He picked up the box and departed the room, leaving me standing there with a shattered heart. I yearned to pursue him, plead for him to stay, but I knew it wouldn't alter anything. He had made up his mind, and for the first time, the realization dawned on me that I might lose him indefinitely. In the subsequent days, I sought to distract myself. I buried myself in work, socialized with friends, and did everything I could to evade solitude within the house. But regardless of what I did, the emptiness persisted, haunting me. John's absence extended beyond the physical. A part of me had gone with him. A month later, I saw him again. He was in a cafe, seated at a table with an unfamiliar woman. She was attractive, not overwhelmingly beautiful, but she possessed a certain natural ease. They were laughing, and he looked joyful, happier than I had seen him in years. I considered approaching them, disrupting their private moment and reminding him that I was still his wife, but I didn't. I simply observed from a distance, feeling the full impact of my own mistakes. It was my fault. I had driven him away, broken him, and now he was living a life without me. When he saw me, his smile briefly faltered, but he displayed neither anger nor resentment. He simply offered a slight nod in acknowledgement and returned to his conversation. It was as if I had already become a memory to him, something he had left behind. As I departed the cafe, I felt the weight of my decisions fully. I had spent so much time blaming him, fixated on his faults, that I failed to appreciate how much he gave me. And now, it was too late. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly alone. And for the first time, I grasped that it wasn't John who had disappointed me. It was me.